Is this $120 smartphone worth it in 2016? Let's find out. Hey everyone, this is Stevie here from NSN Tech Reviews, and today I'm going to be answering just that question. Is the HTC One M8 worth it in 2016? Now, you can find this phone for around $120 off of eBay if you buy it in like B+ used condition, which means that the phone's going to have some scuffs and scrapes. It's just going to show some wear. But I bought a B+ Note 3, and the body was scuffed up a little bit, but the screen was perfectly fine, and that's what I cared about the most. And usually these vendors that sell these phones for like $120, they usually have like a 30-day money-back guarantee, which is awesome, because then if you're not satisfied with the way that your phone looks, you can just send it back, and you get your money back, full refund. That's a great thing. So, in order to delve into this phone, there's going to be 5 sections of this video. First is specs, then design, then you're going to go into performance, camera, and then finally the conclusion. Alright, so let's head on in. At the front of the phone is a 5-inch 1080p display at 441 pixels per inch, which will create a very crisp looking image. On the top and bottom of that display are dual front-facing speakers that sound great. And at the top of the display is a 5-megapixel f2.0 selfie camera. On the rear of the phone, you have your dual cameras, I should say, but it's the dual camera setup, and the main camera that actually takes the photos is a 4 ultra pixel camera, which sort of means that it does better in low light because the pixels are larger. I'll get more into that later. And it has a dual LED flash in the back. It's packing a quad-core Snapdragon 801 processor clocked in at 2.3 GHz with an Adreno 330 GPU and 2 GB of RAM. The phone itself comes in 16 and 32 GB variants, and it also has removable storage so that you can put in like a micro SD card. That is very useful because then you don't have to worry about buying a smaller size phone, because then you can just put in an SD card, expand it up to 256 GB. Especially now that Android 6.0 is on this phone, it has adaptable storage, which means that when you put the SD card in there and you format it right, then you can actually have the SD card act as if it were just internal storage. So you could have like a nearly 300 gig phone, which is awesome. And to top it off, the phone has a non-removable 2600 mAh battery, and it supports Qualcomm Quick Charge 2.0. This phone is beautifully designed. It's nice and weighty and it feels great in the hand, and it's very cool to the touch, so it instantly feels like metal. I think that I love the way that the aluminum is brushed, and I love how it just reflects light, and it's a great design altogether, but the only place where I think it's lacking in design-wise is the rear-facing camera, and by that I mean the scratch-resistant coating that's over the camera. Now, this is the worst thing that's on the phone, definitely, because this scratch-resistant coating literally got so scuffed that I couldn't use the camera, so I had to take rubbing alcohol and put it on a Q-tip and rub it off. It just got so bad that it was literally, I was unable to use the camera. So I think that's the worst part about the design. Other than that, it's beautifully designed, it looks very premium, and it feels premium, and really the only place that you're going to find plastic is up here where the IR blaster is sitting under, and that's it's sort of necessary for that. You can't really have an IR blaster on an all-aluminum phone without making some sacrifice somewhere in the design. Performance on this phone is really fast. Sometimes. Now, what I mean by that is it's very hit or miss. It's either very fast or it's either the slowest phone that I've ever used. And so that just, to me, is sort of a deal breaker in performance area. Is just, I want consistency. I want to know that if my phone's going to be a little slower than yours, I want it to always be that way. I don't want it to like get really slow or go fast for a few days and then just get really slow, which this phone did. And so it never really had a middle grounds. It was either just extremely fast and I was super happy with it, or it was super frustrating to use. Obviously, I meant that in the multitasking way, not in like if you're running Bloons Tower Defense, it's going to really run like really fast one day or really slow the other. That is non-variable. That's just going to stay consistent. If your phone performs some way in a game, It's not going to slow down and it's not going to speed up. It's always going to perform that way. Multitasking, however, that's where the real performance for me comes in, because I multitask a lot, and if it's lagging between like switching apps and doing stuff like that, hitting home like and pausing and stuff, that really annoys me. And so this phone was either great, like best, fastest phone I've ever used, or literally the slowest phone that I've ever used. And so it was always just very hit or miss, is the best way I can describe it. So this is where the phone sort of struggles the most. And even when this phone came out, its camera was not really great. It, like, compared to its competitors, it really didn't have a strong performance. And by that I mean, compared to the S5, the megapixel count, it's literally a quarter of the resolution as the S5, and the ultra pixels, which are supposedly better in low light, don't really give you enough performance in low light to offset the fact that you're getting a quarter of the resolution as its competitors. And I think that the majority of smartphone users are going to be taking photos in lighting that's good enough, or outside, or something like that. They're not going to be worrying about low light performance too much. And so that trade-off to me is not worth it. I think a lot of it is also due to HTC's software. I think a lot of the camera problems are due to HTC's software, because here in the video you can see that I'm moving around. I'm literally just moving between two trees. The lighting is staying consistent because it's the sun, and it's literally just changing white balance. For what reason? I don't know. And here in this video you can see that even when I'm selecting the flower as best as I can, it's still not really focusing on the flower. And you can see that in this photo where the flower is sort of out of focus, and that to me is just a little odd. It should pull focus correctly, but you know, overall the camera is just not good enough for what I would want from a smartphone camera. If I want to take photos of any kind on anything, I always want them to look decent, and I always try my hardest to get great photos out of my DSLR. And if I'm going to be stuck with a smartphone camera, then I want something that I can control to actually make it look good. Oh, and one more thing about this camera. It always seems to be very bright, like overexposes everything. So I always had to have the exposure value, the EV, down to -1. Because if at 0, it would just blow out everything, and so it would just be too bright. So there are some controls for this camera, but not enough to where the point where I could make it look decent. Especially because just zooming in a little bit, or even just looking at the photos on a larger display, prove that the camera isn't really as high resolution as you would really want it to be. And so that to me is another deal breaker. So my concluding statement. Would I suggest this phone to anyone? Unfortunately, I can't say I would. If this was a year ago, yeah, because then you could still buy it for very cheap, and there wasn't really much upgrade within buying a newer phone. But now, 2.5 years later, it's just not worth it for the disadvantages such as battery life and your camera, and performance even. And so with those three flaws combined, it's just too hard for me to say that I would suggest this phone. Especially when you can see that if you go on eBay, you can find like a B+ LG G4, for example, for $150 or so. And that's $30 more for a phone that's a year newer with a much better camera and a removable battery so that you can even swap batteries. So overall, this phone just is not quite worth it anymore because it hasn't aged quite as well as other phones have, and it's just not perfect in enough categories in order for me to suggest that someone buys this now as a daily driver. I hope this video helped you decide on whether or not to buy this phone and if you should buy other phones. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.